Good morning and welcome to Frank's School. Here's the 7th year, 17th day, first video. I'm in sabbatical, as I say, and I'm coming out of sabbatical. Here's something I want to address. Farmers as heroes. Farmers, oh boy, cat fight. I don't just mean the men, certainly the wives as well. A lot of times, you might even say the wives may be more, but a lot of times they're not so visible. And I thought about calling them unsung heroes. Well, there are a lot of unsung heroes. The world is full of unsung heroes. So I don't know, I thought I'd just mention them, but farmers as heroes. We've had some extreme weather here lately. I mean, about 2 weeks ago or a week ago, it was unbelievably cold. And it's cold again now, and then it was warm. That seems like it's the way of the world now. But in that extreme weather, driving along, I came across a farmer who had a heck of a situation on his farm, and he didn't really know how to deal with it. It had to do with the liquid manure system, and clogging, and the cold weather was coming, and he had to deal with it. It wasn't a matter of, well, somebody will come to his rescue. No, he had to deal with it, and I helped to some extent, and another man helped. But anyway, that got me thinking a little bit more about this. Farmers, and I'm speaking about, I guess, a particular kind of farmer, but in general, they not only have themselves to look out for, they've also got their animals. Animals who have lives and souls, say I. And they've got their crops. And they... So when there's harsh conditions, they've got to deal with that. And when it's a dairy farm, well, even regardless of a dairy farm, time is important. I mean, you can't just put animals on shelves and forget them until you're ready. So I was reminded, and I thought, I should comment on the heroism of farmers, that they have to deal with this stuff. And danger? I had once seen, when I moved back here to this farm, quote unquote farm, I remember hearing that the most dangerous occupation in America was farming, more so than mining at that time. And I don't know if it is now, but even then I thought farmers, well, those are probably farmers in general. Now you take a poor farmer on a diversified farm, he doesn't have good equipment. His equipment is breaking down, the brakes are failing periodically. I mean, he has to deal with this stuff, and still he clings on. My father-in-law was a dairy farmer, and he was in that situation. And now around here, that was another thing too. People don't let it go. Even when they can't make money at farming, they lose money at farming. They'll get some other job to make it possible to still farm. And I know people in this area myself, actually, to the extent that I'm a farmer. I did the same thing. I wrote here, "Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys" is a song. And I often thought you might say the same thing about farmers. But farmers have not been glorified, I don't think. I mean, cowboys, yeah. The truth of cowboys is they probably stunk something fierce and were crude and whatever. Well, no. Anyway, cowboys have found their way in America, anyway, to be admired. Farmers, not so much so. I probably should be erasing this stuff as I go through it to keep track. I want to point out, though, that farmers disappearing, certainly of the kind that I mean, as farming becomes centralized and industrialized, the farmers I'm talking about are gradually disappearing, but they still remain depositories for embedded tacit knowledge. They know a lot. They have to. They have to really to survive. They simply can't just hire everything out or hire experts in. Are they admired? I just suggested not as much, I don't think, as they deserve. In literature, Gabriel Oakes comes to mind from Far From the Madding Crowd. Now, he was a hero. He absolutely the hero of that book. And he was more of a shepherd than a farmer. but that's an example. And then I always talk about the Admirable Crichton. I keep mentioning the Admirable Crichtons in that play, because that's another example of someone that already has the knowledge. Now, Admirable Crichton was not a farmer. And I find that they have very often, farmers around here will have admirers, people that try to help them out, or even hang around. They're almost not exactly like a nuisance, but I mean, in a sense, that's the way I was when I tried to help this farmer with that problem. Even though they can't be farmers, they would like to help farmers out, and so they admire them. That I'm speaking very much from around here, so I don't know so much about other places anymore. All right, now down here. So where do I come up with this? It was handed down to me, I think. This idea that farmers are heroes. As a kid, I remember being impressed with the idea that, well, it's farmers that feed us, and I like to eat, and I probably had a certain fear of not having enough to eat, whatever. But beyond that, it was handed down to me by my mother, by her father, my grandfather, and it was just in the family. And I don't want to really go into that now, but I sometimes think of the term imprinting. Konrad Lorenz, with his gray lag geese in Austria, the geese were imprinted with a love of Konrad Lorenz and to follow him. He basically, and when they're young enough, they can be imprinted. That's the term. Well, I think stuff was imprinted on me. And I think in general, people are often imprinted when they're quite young for a certain kind of admiration of a profession. I saw somebody was saying online all his life he wanted to be a trucker. His dad was probably a trucker. And beyond that, I think even the look of a horizon, in my case, I think was imprinted on me. I just am miserable if I'm in a place where I can't see mountains. Probably that's one of the reasons I so much hated it at Harvard. I was not only living in a city, but there were no mountains in sight. Well, in any case, all my life I've worn flannel shirts. I used to come down here from New England to stay with my grandfather, and here I was, at that time there were many more farmers. They wore flannel shirts. That's what I wanted to wear. They were my heroes. And I'd go back to New Hampshire, the capital city, Concord, and that was a little strange. And not only that, their speech patterns imprinted on me as well, covered to a large extent. So, and I use the word vector. I remember at my mother's funeral when I spoke there, I tried to explain that my mother had kind of made me a vector of a certain kind of love of water wheels and primitive stuff and farming. Well, I've been erratic. I sort of knew I was going to be, but in any case, I felt like I really wanted to deal with this. That farmers, in my mind, can be, and usually are, or else they cease to exist, heroes.